If we quit growing mentally or artistically, we begin to die. Walt Disney. Hey guys, welcome back to Why Should I Read That? I'm John, and today is one of the longest books that I've ever went through. And I listened to it on Audible, and it's the Walt Disney biography by Neil Gabler, which came out in 2006, and he was the first writer to have complete access to the Disney archives. All of the correspondence from Walt Disney over his entire life, his inner thoughts, the aspects of it, Gabler was able to encapsulate in this book, which is super, super long. It was 33 hours of an audiobook, and I listened to it at double speed because it was just so long. So I don't recommend it for everyone, but there are some things that I want to point out about this book that are valuable to you if you're running a business or would like to in the future. Now here's the thing, if you want Walt Disney trivia, you can just look it up online. You can find out that Mickey Mouse was originally called Mortimer. You can find out that there were a bunch of names for the Seven Dwarfs that were rightfully left on the cutting room floor. I'm not going to name them just because there's so many of them. But here's the thing about Walt Disney. He was an individual who shaped the heart and mind of the American people throughout the 20th century. And if you're in business, or if you're interested in culture, or why people act the way that they do, or just how the American mindset was created, it's interesting enough to go check out the life of Walt Disney. So Walt Disney grew up in Marceline, Missouri. He was from Kansas City and spent some time in other places, but his favorite childhood home was Marceline. And he spent the rest of his life seeking to create that utopia that he experienced there. Now, one of the themes of the book is that Walt was continually trying to escape the pressures and cares of the world and control the world that he was living in, or at least the headspace that he was in, through his art. And that's something that reverberated throughout his life and resonated with a generation of Americans who felt that they could be whimsical and their dreams could come true through the artistry of Walt Disney. And that's exactly what Walt Disney was, an artist. First, last, and always. Walt Disney was an artist. He was not a corporate leader by choice, though in later years there were Mickey Mouse, mac and cheese, there was Donald Duck, spinach, there was just everything. And he didn't get into that business because he wanted to, it was because he was really forced to. And along with his brother Roy, who ended up managing most of the company, Walt Disney wanted to free up as much of his time as he could to spend with the worlds that he was creating. Now in the early days, as they were doing comedic shorts or just short animations, he would look over the shoulder and look at every single frame of the animation. But eventually he couldn't do that. And there was always the back and forth about how Walt managed his people. He was not a very admirable corporate leader. He was definitely irritable and authoritarian. He ruled with fear in his studio. So if you're looking for an example of how to run a company in the authoritarian way, definitely model yourself after Walt Disney. If not, he's a good example of that aspect of leadership. So another thing, Walt Disney set himself up in a lot of ways against the world, and he escaped into his art. And as I mentioned, that art was the top priority for Walt Disney, making sure that he could control the quality. He was obsessed with quality, and that played itself out in many different areas of their business. During the time of World War II, when there was not the demand for the whimsical movies that we think of when we think of Disney, they were forced to, in order to keep their studio afloat, which was heavily in debt for most of the years that Walt was alive, they were forced to work on government projects. And Walt steamed under the collar for the fact that they had to simply push these things out rather than keeping them to the technical level of perfection that he so desperately desired. Now, on the other hand, this played out in ways that we're not exactly sure what was going on. Like, for example, the movie Fantasia. You can rent it, but I guarantee you it's different than most movies that you've seen, since it's a collection of 6 shorts, most of which are remarkably perfect for the years in which they were created, but it doesn't have the same level of heart and story as a film such as Snow White or Sleeping Beauty or Cinderella, etc. Despite an obsession with quality, Walt Disney was one of those individuals who was constantly creating. A close confidant said of him in his later years that if a temporary problem seemed insoluble, he would simply switch to another project and continue on it working just as hard. And during his quote-unquote midlife crisis, he became obsessed with model trains, which was the seed idea for one of Walt's personal utopias, what became known as Disneyland, and eventually later on Disney World, which Walt died before he was able to see entirely completed. But again, with a man who with such a burning vision for perfection, people were saying the colloquialism or folklore around his death is that they said it's too bad that he was never able to see the completed Disney World. But those who were close to him came back and said, no, he saw it in his mind, that's why it's here. And that's the thing. I want to talk with you guys a little bit about what we can pull from the life of a man who we don't want to necessarily emulate as a corporate leader, but who we can take numerous lessons from as an individual who shaped the culture of a country. So Walt Disney was constantly creating. He never stopped. And regardless of whether it was part of a specific project or whether it was just something that he had in his mind that might never materialize, he was always creating. He was also an artist before he was a corporate executive. And that obsession with the quality of his art created something that has lasted through generations. If you didn't have an opportunity to watch Disney films growing up, most people would ask you what happened to your childhood. And finally, Walt Disney had an insatiable growth mindset. As I mentioned in the intro, he literally believed that if you're not growing artistically or mentally, you're beginning to die. Now, as the author, Neil Gabler, ends the book, he said Walt Disney only achieved perfection in death. In our memories, we can look at the Disney vision and look at it through perfect lenses. Now, here's the thing. Perfection is not available to any of us in this life, Walt Disney, you, or me. But you can inspire other people through your imagination and the amount of good content that you're creating or art that you're making. If you're interested in that aspect of it, I recommend that you go check out Neil Gaiman's commencement speech, Make Good Art. It has a radical impact on the way that I've looked at creating content in today's world. But on the other hand, if you really want to get into the psyche of a man who changed the culture of America, you can go ahead and delve into that 33 hours and 20 minutes of content in Neil Gabler's biography of Walt Disney. So thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video on Walt Disney and his mindset. If you like the biography aspect of this video, you can go check out last time's video, the Shoe Dog book about the founder of Nike, another great read that I highly recommend. So if you got value from this video, go ahead and subscribe down below, like the video. If not, hopefully I'll catch you next time with one that you like better. See you later.